Welcome to Hired, Navigate Your Job Search. I'm your host, George Murray, and each week we try to identify one particular topic for those who may be new to job transition or maybe struggling in a long job transition, and then also bring in a subject matter expert to talk about those and ask those questions. And as we ask and encourage questions from our viewers that are live on LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, and then we're uploaded to all the podcast platforms by Saturday afternoon. This episode, we're talking about networking, growing your career one network conversation at a time. Want to introduce you to Kurt Schmidt. Kurt Schmidt is the president of Foundry, so www.foundrymakes.com, a pioneer software company that serves a wide variety of B2B industries. He uses his management, leadership, and coaching experience to inspire career-focused people to grow in their day-to-day work. He is also the host of the Schmidt List. It's a podcast that has connected him with some prominent leadership minds. With decades of work experience, Kurt has learned the best kept secrets for business success. Throughout his podcast, coaching, and other networking, he shares valuable wisdom and helps professionals to succeed. More information, you can go to www.schmidt-list.com. So want to welcome to the show Kurt. And also, Kurt's got a book, which I always highly recommend for people who may have not been out networking or new to networking. It's called The Little Book of Networking. So welcome to the show, Kurt. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's in Kurt's life? Because I thought I was busy.
Thanks, George. I really appreciate you having me. So as you mentioned, president at Foundry, and we do a lot of design and custom development for businesses to help them just accelerate their growth through digital solutions. So we've been around for almost 10 years and having a great time doing it. And then, as you mentioned, I moonlight. I've been doing a podcast for about 6 years. Wow. And I do a lot of speaking events on the subject of career development. I do a lot of coaching with executives in transition, and then also, I have 4 children and a pandemic dog to take care of. So it's been it's a busy day always here at the Schmidt House.
So can you tell us a little bit, what's the inspiration of this book right here?
Well, as I mentioned, the pandemic, back when it first really started hitting, I noticed a lot of layoffs happening, and I felt in a position where I could help a lot of people. So I had gone to LinkedIn and I put a link to my Calendly there, and I said, hey, if you need help with resume, interviews, practice, whatever, just book some time with me. I want to help. And I had like 40 people sign up for discussions. And what I noticed, George, over the course of those discussions is that most people's resumes were okay. They weren't terrible. Their education was fine. They had the certifications that they needed. But the thing that just kept coming back and back was their network was terrible. Right. They had like 40, maybe 80 connections on LinkedIn. They didn't go to any events. They didn't really know any peers outside of their last job. And so I felt compelled to help them figure out how to do this. But as you know, George, there was a lot of initial pushback, right? Like, I'm too busy. People just are very transactional, and I don't want to meet people that are transactional, and the array of arguments against, to which I started giving them tactical ways to overcome those challenges. And then that turned into a PDF, which then I had a friend who runs a small publishing company called Wise Inc. in Northeast Minneapolis suggest I turn it into a book. And here we are about 2 years later. So.
Well, that's great. We I think it was last week or maybe the week before, we talked about Bob Berg. co-author of The Go-Giver. And Lenny Newman and Ann Pryor talk about, there's takers, users, givers, and shares. Takers are the transactional people, right?
Yeah.
One and done, never see them again. But the people I see that go far are, get the initial conversation going, and over a period of time, and it doesn't take very long to establish a relationship, right?
Yep.
Because then it's kind of like anything else, like in business, you're going to go break bread and you're going to get to know people at a different level, at a deeper level. And then you just feel obligated. It's kind of like, almost an extended part of your family.
Oh, 100%. And I'm glad you brought that up, George, because one of the mindsets that I try to help people understand is that many people sort of live on this. Well, these are people I would invite to my child's wedding. And then these are people that I work with. And then in between, there is nothing. But in between is where I think the most opportunities is in that gray zone of where you are meeting and working with high professionals. You are learning from each other. You're following each other's careers. You're staying in touch. You're sharing opportunities. I think that's where community really starts. And that's what community should be, because I always try to tell people, I only use the word networking because people really understand that word. They know what it means. But what we're really trying to become here is community builders, building community around us, building community around an idea, building a community around a need. And that's really where the value starts to come through.
No, I totally agree. One of the next questions is, in your book, you emphasize the importance of authentic connections, and we were getting to that. Could you explain why authentic is crucial? You and I think, believe and understand this in networking, how it differs from superficial that we talked about in that transactional.
Yeah. It's that transactional thing. And and I have people say, that's what stops them from networking, because they're worried about transitional things. And those people, that I totally understand that. Excuse me. But again, it's, if you want to learn to ride a bike, you're going to fall. You probably scrape a knee or an elbow. And just like networking, you will run into people that are transactional and that just want something from you, or are not as reciprocal, right? Yeah. And that's okay. You just move on past those people and you go to the next thing. So you don't let that get you down, right? You don't let one teacher in school say, well, you're probably not going to be very good at math. I'm sure Einstein had lots of teachers tell him he wasn't going to be good at math. You hear stories like this over and over again, right? Where people have overcome small challenges in order to achieve greatness. And so, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to run into some transactional people or people who just want to, sell me something, like, I can overcome that and move on. So, and that authentic relationship is where you really start to see that the more value you share with them, the more value you get back. And that could be anything. It could be anything, just like, hey, did you hear about this thing? Right? Just like you have a neighbor in the neighborhood, right? Who's like, hey, can I, borrow a saw or something, right?
Right.
Here, I have a saw. You go ahead and borrow it. It's the same type of mentality, but I don't understand why, when it comes to, your profession, that people get so worried about it.
So I just want to recognize some of the viewers. Good morning, Brad, Markwell, Nishit Gupta, Natalie Tangent, and Janet. Is it Janet? Or no, sorry. That's just Lynette Akich. In the book, you've got a lot of great quotes, and it's going to go into the next question here, but it may seem scary or intimidating at first. And I think we've met a lot of those people when they're in their first transition and all about networking, because I didn't even know how to spell networking back in 2016, let alone do it. But you said intimidating is first, but just remember, most people are willing to help. And I do agree. But if you don't ask, you'll never know. And that was from Jim Martin. So the next question is kind of right into that. Is networking often carries a stigmatism, as we're kind of talking about that, and being insincere and opportunistic? How can professional networking in a genuine and meaningful way still advance their careers?
Yeah, I would say number one is, don't just network when you need to network.
Mm-hmm.
The worst time to work on your resume is when you need to work on your resume. The worst time to invest is when you're broke, right? So networking should be something that you're doing for the long term and committed to for your professional career. It's something that is a skill set that you need to build over time and value you need to provide over time. So right out the gate, you're probably not going to have a lot of resources in order to be able to share, but over time you can build those things.
No, I agree. And one of the points I talk about in my book, my first book, Hired, is, creating that personal board of advisors, kind of those people that you can reach
100%.
out, coach, and everything else. And, you want them to be a part of your inner circle to help you, hold you accountable, and also be able to tell you at times, hey, George, you've been crying about this for about a week or so. Time to put your big boy pants on and kind of hit it hard. And all those people I met that are on my personal board of advisors are people I met in networking. It's not people I knew for years and years and years. I was blessed because I met so many great people that I would have never met live or dead otherwise. So I looked at job transition as more of a transformation of myself. What do I need to do differently?
Yeah.
So I can definitely see and reflect going back to 2016, definitely a different person.
Yeah. And you've got to remember, I mean, mentors choose their mentees. It's not the other way around. Just because you want a mentor doesn't mean that you can just go and choose a mentor. They have to choose you. So there should be some value exchange there. And it could be just that person is validating a lot of their experiences, which happens to me a lot, right? Where I'm like, I have a lot of scars from doing this a long time. So it helps validate me. And as I tell people, why do you hire me? Well, because I'm from the future. I've already done everything you're about to embark on when it comes to digital transformation. So hire me to come in and be that person who can see what the future looks like for you, because I've been through it. I've done it great. I've screwed it up, all the above. So that's who you want in those mentors. But yeah, I love that you said the personal board of advisors, George, because it's also, that's important to have, but it's also got to be finding ways to deliver value back to your advisors is really important as well.
Yeah, I always tell people it's one of those quivers that are in your toolkit, right? That you pull out. And I always tell people, when you're out networking, do get connected to people who are what I would term the Uber connectors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've met them. You are one of them. Steve Staup is another one if you're living in the Minnesota area, whatever. Ryan Carlson as well. But these people have seen so many people in transition. They've seen, what they've been successful at and not successful at, and it can help you curve your transition time considerably just by sitting down and understanding, hey, I'm new to this, and being humble and being open and saying, help me understand this process, right?
Yeah, and it's so much different these days because a lot of the executives in transition or senior managers in transition that I've been doing some coaching with, these are people that have worked for a very large company for 15 years, for 20 years, for a dozen years, and they come out and they're not exactly sure how do you network in today's digital world. And because it is different, it's different than it was before the pandemic. It's different than it was a few years before. It's changed. And so there's some skill sets that you have to be able to build up in order to I wouldn't say competitive, but keep the momentum going for yourself.
Yeah. One of the things I try to really tell people, because I'm sure you meet a lot of those people too, is they don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, of course. Yeah.
And you read it on LinkedIn. I mean, it's probably more prevalent in the last 8 months with all the layoffs or whatever, but people sit behind a computer all day submitting resumes. I submitted 500 resumes last month with no interview. And it's like, well, the national average is in the single digit numbers of securing your next opportunity through resumes. But the national average through networking is 72%. In the state of Minnesota, it's in the mid 80s, right? So Minnesota's got kind of a lock-in as far as what to do to turn around and cut your time in half. And that's through networking, right? So you got to have a plan, work your plan, but also evaluate your plan every couple of weeks to say, okay, what do I need to change? What's not working for me? Let me stop that. And maybe with all these people I've talked to, maybe there's something I want to turn around and try and incorporate, and it might work for me.
Right. And then once I get through this hump, how do I maintain this and keep it as part of my regular exercise and routine going forward throughout the rest of my professional career?
You mentioned that networking isn't just about finding a job, but also growing the work you do. Could you
Yeah.
elaborate on how effective networking can contribute to professional growth? Because I think a lot of people don't look as networking when they finally get into a job as internal networking.
Yes. Well, and internal networking is huge. I recently just did a talk for a mid-sized company on with a lot of their senior managers on how to improve their internal networking. And the idea is that, I mean, I've even talked to CEOs and CTOs of Fortune 7 companies, and I've asked them, how do you get work done here? And they've literally said to my face, it's who you know.
Hmm.
And it's important to understand what people's titles are in a business, but more so, and as everybody here knows, that the titles are, kind of they're not real. um, those people have different value or better value or whatever. They have better skill sets, and so when you have special initiatives, special programs, things that are going to accelerate your team, the business, your product line, whatever forward. You might need to put together a SEAL Team 6 of specialists across the organization, and you need to know who those people are that are going to contribute in a way that helps make things successful, much like you need on the outside. Back to, I look at that personal board advisors as a similar sort of fire team that you're putting together to go out into an uncharted area and keep each other safe and keep each other accountable. So the whole goal is to make sure that when you're internal networking, that you are very clear on what your goals are, on why you're talking with these people, why you're meeting with them, and learning what their goals are and what their values are. It's really important because it will help lift up your understanding of what the business is, because typically there's lots of fiefdoms, especially in a larger business, right? You have sales versus marketing, marketing versus production, yada, 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 product versus sales. If you start to really work to break down those barriers, you can become seen as a valued person, not just in your own group, but across the organization. And that's an easy way to start the promotion train working really fast for you.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's strength in numbers. If you reach out, especially if you're in a kind of a highly matrixed organization like you're
Yeah.
talking about, where there's a lot of indirect interests, in the area that you're managing and so forth, to reach out and get their perspectives as well as kind of have some kind of cadence of follow-up. You develop that relationship so that if things do tend to get rocky, you have the internal support system that says, hey, you know what, this is just a bad thing. How can I help you? Right. And they kind of get you out of that kind of divot.
Yeah, for sure.
Many people feel professionally stuck, but claim they don't have time to invest in networking.
Oh,
That's been true, especially the last couple of months. Everybody's kind of getting kids back to school, and the last thing they want to do is
yeah.
networking. But what advice would you give them to start building valued connections despite their busy schedules?
Yeah, well, there's a part of my dad that just wants to say, get your priorities straight. um, you have time to binge watch Netflix. It isn't just other people that are attributing to the high watch time of those shows on streaming, or why TikTok is such a huge force of nature these days. Um, so first of all, get the priorities straight. And networking, again, it's a loaded term, right? Because you think, well, this means I have to spend time in front of people. That's not necessarily true, because through digital, we have the opportunity to check in with folks, to ping folks, to pass out over compliments or opportunities or things without a lot of effort, right? But if we don't work at these things every single day, right, we are going to fall behind in our goals. It's back to the idea of saving every day, investing every day over time, because I hear the same types of people that are saying, well, I'll never buy a new car because used is better and I want to use my money for my retirement or these other things. Well, how about instead of spending, 3 hours watching football, maybe we just watch the highlights and spend an hour writing some emails to folks, right, that we can send tomorrow, checking in with them, letting them know what our status is and what our updates are, and asking them if their needs have changed at all. There's ways you can make this work. I've heard all the excuses before, George, and again, depending on how much you want to retire with, right, means how much you need to save to invest. Same with networking. If you spend 15 minutes a day, that's great. At least you're saving some and you're investing some, right? But if you can do an hour, that's great. If you're out of work, well, guess what? Your full-time job should be finding a full-time job.
One of the things I think, it's the call, right? The call only has to be 5 or 10 minutes, but say, hey, Kurt, it's been a while since I've talked to you.
Yeah.
Just want to kind of check in, right? So the next time I don't, hear from you is like 3 years from now when you're in job transition. The other thing too is, getting 4 or 5 like-minded people, and they probably know each other somewhat or heard each other, and just, send an inspirational quote in the morning. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. And at least about 50% of them just respond and say, hey, you know what? That's something I just needed today. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
You just don't know, right?
Nope. Yeah. I mean, there's key things that you need to understand when getting into the networking for building your professional career. And number one is get over yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely learn. I hope that you learn. If you don't, then you're out in transition a little bit longer than you expected. And that's where you kind of have to, when you're pointing the finger, like my dad said, 3 are pointing back at you, that you got to do something. You got to look at yourself and reflect. What do I need to do differently?
Yep.
Your book caters to both seasonal professionals and those starting in their careers. What are some network basics that are applicable to professionals at any stage of their career journey?
Yeah, it's interesting because I find that when I do so my book was recently chosen to be required reading for the Minneapolis College of Art and Design's Creative Entrepreneurship Program. And
congratulations.
Thanks. And I'm really excited about it because there's a lot of young people reading this book, because what I found is that people in their 40s and people in their 20s, when it comes to networking, have very similar concerns. One is that they both don't have a strong network because they, like I mentioned, they might have been at a place like Honeywell or 3M for 15 years, 20 years. And now they don't have an external network, right? Much like a student might. So, the common challenges is that people are starting from square one and they don't understand what value I don't have anything of value. I got nothing in my pockets, right? And it's a common misconception that just because you don't, have a rich uncle or something, I don't know, or a fancy title or 100 years experience, that you can't offer value to people. And that's one thing I talk about in the book is the first thing you can offer that is probably the most valuable is being a good listener.
I agree. Yeah, because the fact is that we tend to listen to respond. And if you truly listen and be able to come back with, hey, here's what I heard you say, maybe summarize. Actually, Lenny Newman does this very, very well.
Right. People put in thousands and thousands of dollars a year in therapy and these types of things because of the value of being listened to. And anybody who's been to therapy or even watched a TV show that talks about therapy, it's a lot of the therapist listening and then repeating back what you said and saying, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So here's what I heard you say. Yeah. And then you start to toil over it. So they want you pay them big bucks for you to turn around and figure out your own problems.
Yeah, right. Well, there's exactly right. So, but that's part of being a good listener, whether you're an employee or you're networking. It's a skill set, and they call them soft skills. I don't know why they call them soft skills, because they're the hardest skills to learn. So those are things that you can flex versus, thinking that you need some sort of other, I don't know, special magic to build a network.
When you talk about the soft skills and everything, it reminds me a couple of days ago, Gary Vaynerchuk, actually posted kind of a little meme that stated, people always tend to say, need these soft skills, but he's like, and then he talks about the hard skills. He goes, I find that most people struggle working those soft skills and developing those soft skills. How can networking open doors to new opportunities for career advancement? And can you provide some examples for your own experience or those who've encountered while coaching and mentoring others?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because the idea of networking, if every time, and I've been doing my podcast for 6 years, I have 230 some episodes, and a lot of times I start the show off with asking people, when you were young, are you in the career you imagined you would be? And almost 99.9% say no. The idea of a career is a winding river. It is not a straight shot. It is not a bridge that just takes you from point A to point B. And so the opportunities that arise are sometimes as much generated by the people around you as there are by the opportunities you create for yourself. And so what do they call luck, right? It's an opportunity acted on, right? That's what people sometimes refer to when they call luck.
Right.
And so, college buddy says, hey, George, you know what? I borrowed some money from my uncle. I'm going to start this thing. I'd love for you to come and help me do this thing. Well, you're at a crossroads. You have a choice. I could go and help that buddy, and that could be the next 5 years of my life. Or I could go back and focus on my liberal arts degree or whatever the case may be and work my way to becoming the librarian that I always wanted to be. Or I could take this thing and go and join a fracking company up in North Dakota, or whatever the case may be. We are presented with these crossroads at all the time. And so the bigger and more robust and stronger our network is, the more those choices we get presented to ourselves to help us navigate where we want to go over time. And so for me personally, it was about making sure that I was networking with peers, but I was also spending a lot of time networking with people where I wanted to be, or at least where I thought I wanted to be. Right.
Sure.
So when I was a manager, I would try to network with directors. When I was a director, I would try to network with VPs, and I would get a sense of, do I want, not only do I want that role, but what do they say, George? Right, you're like a amalgamation of like the five people closest to you, right, or something.
Right.
So that's the same in professional cases as well. And so if they know who you are, what your values are, what offers or what value you bring, what your personal values are. It's easy for them to make recommendations when these opportunities arise. And as you know, George, as a person who's been a senior leader in organizations, these opportunities pop up all the time, right?
Yes.
CEO walks in Monday and is like, well, Bill's leaving. We need to refill his role. And that CEO's first guess isn't, well, let's spend 9 weeks interviewing people. They're going to be like, who do you guys know? Who do you folks know that we can get in here? So, that's a part of tapping into the network. And that's been a big part of my growth. I don't think I've gotten a job through a resume since I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. At least the last 15 years, it's always been kind of introductions and networking. That's why I always tell people, you got even introverts, there's a way, and I talk about it, the process in my book as well, as, people who are introverts that never network, can learn over a period of time. I was an introvert, back in 2016, but I realized the power of networking, and I just had to figure out, okay, how do I get into the shallow end? Because I'm not going to get close enough to the deep end, like our parents, like at least our parents grew up. You want to learn how to swim? They just dumped you in
That's
the
right.
deep end, right? No one's getting close to the pool there, right? So you've got to find a way to kind of gradually get into, the wading and then get out into the deep end of it.
Yeah, and I would challenge people that, if you're extremely shy person, then focus on digital for a time to build a safe relationship with someone that you can then decide if you want to go and meet in person. And if you're someone who doesn't feel necessarily safe networking, always bring a buddy
Yeah,
with you. Bring a colleague or someone as you're meeting people and
a
networking with
wingman or a
people. Don't go by
wing
yourself.
person.
And then you can feel in a much safer spot. So and count on people introducing you to other people instead of focusing on just introducing yourself again, depending on if you feel that it's safe to do so. Because I do know lots of people in underserved communities, George, that don't feel safe just reaching out to other people because they historically have been taken advantage of or on the defensive. So focus on asking your current network to introduce you to people instead of feeling like you have to be out there meeting folks. So
No, I totally agree. And, as we're on the topic of digital, in today's digital age, how can professionals effectively combine online and offline networking strategies to meet their network and increase their chances of finding the right job or career opportunity?
yeah, I would say that the in-person events, as you've probably seen, George, has been happening a lot more in the last year, right? They've been increasing, but they aren't fully back. There's still a lot of virtual going on there, and so the virtual stuff I think is great because not only does it open up you to be a bit more regular with your networking, but it can expand you worldwide. I mean, I was a part of a worldwide conference just a couple of weeks ago. And I met and networked with people from Israel and Germany and Venezuela and all these different things. It was just great. And yeah, of course, I'm not anytime soon planning on meeting with these folks, but knowing that what they do and what their skill sets are and having a record of that and being able to use them as people I could reach out to when I have questions about those sorts of skill sets, if I have questions about what this means in a multicultural sense, sort of, all these different things. And so that network is making me better at my job, which makes me more valuable, which means the boss will pay me more money. And back to your whole idea back there earlier about internal networking, one thing I wanted to say is that when they are hiring people from the outside versus promoting people internally, the reason why is because they're looking for people to bring value from the outside into the organization. That doesn't stop once you're at the organization. They're hoping that you continue to bring in a pipeline of outside information. So you should be looking for opportunities to go and network and do these things and tell your boss, I'm going to a networking event. Oh, are you looking for another job? No, I'm looking for ways to bring more value to this role that I have and on the team that I'm managing, and being clear and setting expectations. It's great.
Last question. Can you offer a sneak peek into some of the business success secrets or practical networking advice that readers can expect to find in your book, The Little Book of Networking?
Well, the number one thing is maintaining your network and maintaining it over time. And the key here, if anybody could take away one word from the book, it's consistency. It's not about meeting the right people. It's not about always meeting or avoiding the bad people. It's about staying consistent with your networking, making sure that you are consistent. And so what I talk about in the book is a system that can help you become more consistent with checking in with your network, but also reminding your network on that you're looking for things, right? Because if we think about things, we as professionals, as humans, we have a bias. If we no news is good news to us. So if I'm networking with George and George is like, yeah, I'm looking for a senior role in yada yada, Oh, great. Thanks, George. Cool. If I don't talk to George or hear from George or see anything from George 3 months from now, guess what? My bias is that he probably has a job. Seemed like a smart guy. Seemed like he
And he
knows
was a
what
taker. He
he's
was
a
a taker, and he never followed up
he
with
was
me and
super
told me he landed.
transactional. He just I barely got out of there with my shirt on. Uh, so we have this bias. So if we are, and then on the other side, it's very rough to tell people that you don't have a job, or that you're looking for a job. We feel like it reduces our status in society in some way. And so we've got these things working against us, George. What we need to be doing is letting people know, because as my mom always said, you get 100% of what you don't ask for. So
Mhm.
if you're not out reminding people consistently that you are still looking and what you are looking for, they have no reason to be looking for you or to be keeping an eye out for you, because you can't just tell. I mean, again, any of us who have children or even have a boss, you can't tell somebody just something once and then they
Right.
get it. You have to be consistent. So I would say the biggest key unlock in the book that I provide is a system that helps you stay consistent.
Yeah, one of the things that I encourage people, and this is really becoming humble and opening up, right? Because a lot of time people, don't like to post on LinkedIn or whatever. But I'm like, well, if you've got like 500 connections and they don't know, and you haven't talked to them in, a couple of years, they don't know that you're out looking, right? So, and you've probably seen it every 2 weeks, I'll post something. Hey, here's what I'm looking for, right? Specifically. And I ask people, if you come in contact or would you share this on yours? Then you get the exposure of their connections, right? And I've seen a lot of um, people come back to me and say, hey, I know this person, I saw the post, is there anything I can do? It's interesting. Back to an earlier comment, you said people are willing to help as long as they understand what that is. And it's
Yes.
really your responsibility to clarify that. No, it's great. Well, hey, Kurt, it's been great. I really appreciate you coming on board and talking about your book, The Little Book of Networking. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way is, right on LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. So you can just find, if you look for a Kurt Schmidt that's bald and has glasses and a beard, you're pretty much going to be able to find me pretty quickly. And I love to connect with, obviously, I wrote a book on networking. I love to connect with new people. And I've been starting a small community of executives in transition, where we're going to be meeting regularly and discussing challenges and those sorts of things. So if you have people in your audience that are interested in those things, to reach out and just connect with me. So I appreciate it. Thank you again, George. I'm a big fan of yours and the books that you write. So it's really an honor to be here. Thank you.
Same here. I love this book. Again, no one wants to read the dictionary. This is quick, it's easy, especially for people new. I mean, even high school, like you mentioned, high school kids, they don't know how to do this networking. I would try to get my two boys to listen to me. It's like, you should at least know a doctor, a lawyer, etc.
Sure.
They didn't take my advice, but of course, it's coming from Dad. But if it came from somebody else, maybe they would have listened.
It's true. And I wrote the book specifically targeted towards an executive on a plane ride and my 26-year-old daughter.
Nice. That's great. Well, thank you again, Kurt. We'll kind of close this.
I appreciate it.
shop
Thank
there.
you, George.
Thank you. All right. So if anyone's in job search and believes the show can help others, I do ask for you to forward it, help, or post it, repost it, reshare it. And again, you can always lead them to the links for Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other 12 platforms that are out there. These are always uploaded. So if you're interested in going to see older shows, you have the opportunity to go as well. But want to also tell you that, The Little Book of Networking is definitely one of the 6 books I recommend. We talked about The Go-Giver, who's been on the show, the Go-Author. We also talked about The NCG Factor, Larry Kaufman's book, which is another great book. But there's also an older book, which is, I'm sure people have heard about this, is How to Win Friends and Influence Others. This is my 1994 copy. So you can see it's been read a couple of times. But again, not just to help you in job search, but also to help you in your overall career when you do land, and you will land. So I also want to tell people, thank you for this, joining us this week. Again, if we can help you in any way, please reach out.
Get my